so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to this AM&P Network session. I'm Jen Smith. This is an Associations Council Lunch and Learn. This is print, paper, and postage, what you need to know for the year ahead. Today, we're welcoming Meghan Stromberg, Lisa Townsend, Martin Sullivan, and Brian Grimes. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves in just a minute. Before we get started, I do have a couple of notes from us at AM&P Network. We follow a code of conduct in all of our spaces, and we have a strong statement regarding DE&I. I will put these links in the chat later in the session so that you can review them. Just a reminder of SIA's antitrust statement. It's important that we avoid discussion of sensitive topics like specifics around pricing or cost information or other topics like that. AM&P Network is a CAE approved provider, and this session can be applied for 1 credit toward your CAE earnings. AM&P Network has a lot of events coming up, so come back and join us next week on Slack. Meghan is hosting. We're doing a Slack chat bright and early Thursday morning, even earlier for Meghan. We're talking talent development in 2023. And then we've got 2 events scheduled for January. We've got the next Signature Live event, January 12th, and then the next Lunch and Learn event on January 19th. That is moderated by Randy Ford from First Story Strategies, and that is New Year's evolutions, and we're looking at trends in marketing and content and more. We've got 2 big in-person events happening in 2023. We've got the BIMS event. This is Amplify AM&P Network's Business Information and Media Summit. That's happening in February in Orlando. And we've just announced dates for Amplify Content and Marketing Summit. That is June 27th and 28th in DC at the National Housing Center. You can see all of this and you can register for all of these events at sia.net/events. So a couple of things for the session today. The chat is open for you all to use. It's great to see everyone introducing themselves. If you have questions for the panelists, and I know that we will all be very happy to take your questions, please use the Q&A module to pose questions during the session. Also, the captioning is enabled. To see it, you can go to Show Captions and then view full transcript. So moderating today's discussion is Meghan Stromberg, the editor-in-chief at the American Planning Association. And so with that, I would like to invite Meghan to kick us off today.
Thanks, Jen. And I'm so glad to see so many people here. This is a topic that association publishers and media professionals of all stripes are always thinking about, sort of what is happening with the postal situation, rates, what have you, delays, what's happening in the printing world. So I'm so glad that you're joining us for this conversation. It's particularly relevant right now for a couple of reasons. One that Brian, I think, will talk about a little bit, but it's also for many of us, it's we're finalizing or have finalized, our fiscal year 23 budgets. And so we've had to make some decisions perhaps, or we're thinking through some decisions about what we're going to do in the face of what's changing in these worlds and what is changing, right? So it's been a time of great change. And in the media world, these changes obviously predate the pandemic, but that has certainly exacerbated it. We've seen budget constraints, of course. We've seen changes in how our members and readers and users and customers behave. We've seen changes in how and where they work, right? But it's also been a particularly volatile time for paper, printing, and postage. There have been supply chain issues. There have been mergers and acquisitions, plant closures, price increases. So just a lot of change. And it's a topic that is really personal, professional to me because of some changes that our group made. So the American Planning Association publishes a few different publications. Our member publication is one that used to come out 12 times a year, but for fiscal year 21, we were asked to cut our budget by 25%. And so we did that through, unfortunately, a headcount change, but also by changing the frequency of our publication and going from a monthly publication to quarterly. And then as well, we worked with our printer to change the paper weight, the paper type, our trim size to understand the most efficient page count for the equipment they use. So my experience, I think, is a lot similar maybe to a lot of you, or something that you will be seeing soon, is just sort of what do you need to do to make sure that you're innovating and responding and hopefully being proactive about the changes that we're seeing in terms of print and postage. So obviously our panelists will talk a little bit more about that, and I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute. But I wanted to remind everybody that we will do a Q&A at the end. And if you have a question, if a question pops up as we're going, feel free to put it in the Q&A module at the bottom of your screen. And then I'll make another pitch for the Slack chat. Generally, the Slack channel for AM&P Network is a great place to raise questions like this and to talk with your peers and get a sense of what kind of solutions are they seeing, what are the challenges they're seeing. It's just a great way to build community and get to know more about the challenges that we all share. So without further ado, let me introduce Brian Sullivan. Oh, do we have somebody piping up? No, okay. So let me introduce Martin Sullivan, sorry. Martin is the Director of Procurement for CJK Group, which is the parent company of Sheridan, a big printer that we probably all know of. I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself in a minute, but first I want to tell you a little fun fact. When you hear Martin speak, you'll hear that he's obviously from Florida, and that is where he learned how to play ice hockey and developed a passion for it. So obviously that's where everyone learns about hockey, right? Florida. Next up is Brian, and Brian Grimes is the logistics mail manager for Sheridan. So Martin will be talking about paper, Brian will be talking about postage, and Brian has worked at Sheridan for a long time, about a decade. And interestingly enough, he and Martin started on the very same day. So there's that fun fact. And then of course we have Lisa Townsend, and she is the marketing director for the Association of Clinical Research Professionals. And she is going, again, she'll introduce herself, but she's going to talk to us a little bit about how associations are innovating in the midst of massive change. And what you might not know about Lisa is she is trained as a pastry chef. So if you have any royal icing questions, please put those in the chat. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Martin, would you please kick us off? Or Martin, why don't you kick us off with your intro, and then we'll have you kick us off with a conversation.
Sure. Yeah. Not really a South Florida accent, but I come from the UK originally. I've been in printing for 40 years. Various aspects. Actually started as an estimator, and been involved in numerous, just about every other aspect of print management since. Been with CJK for 11 years, and really kind of purchasing has become my key role, and so something that I enjoy doing. It brings a new challenge every day.
Great. How about you, Brian?
I am Brian Grimes. I'm the mailing and logistics manager for Sheridan Print. I've been with them, like she said, for about 10, 11 years now. My background's about 30 years in the industry. I started out as a programmer, worked for some of the major printers like Donnelly, Hart Hanks, down to the smaller ones, family-owned businesses down in Texas and in Nevada. Just trying to get a handle on all the changes that have been happening over the last couple of years, especially with the pricing of the logistics has been a little crazy. So hopefully that'll be part of this conversation today, because I have a feeling a lot of people have experienced the same. That's it.
Right, Lisa?
Hi. So as you mentioned, I'm the marketing director for the Association of Clinical Research Professionals. And before that, I was with an association management company for 8 years. We managed the Association of Community Cancer Centers and 22 smaller state oncology societies. So was responsible for marketing for all of the organizations, and that covered all of our conferences, education, advocacy, membership, and so on. So excited for the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Martin, why don't you start telling us a little bit about what's going on in the print and paper industry?
Yeah, sure. So just start off with a recap of 2022. We really went into the year in a pretty tight position with paper. We'd lost over 6 million tons of graphic arts paper globally over the prior 2 years. And then my first hour of my first day of this year was involved in a call telling me that the Resolute had closed their Calhoun mill, which took out about another 160,000 tons of offset, which really just kickstarted the whole kind of snowball thing with paper supply this year. It kind of drove everybody to start looking at what could they use as alternatives, where could they go, and really that offset situation then just spread to all other grades as everybody snapped up whatever they could get at that time. It really the mills went on strict allocations, which historically allocations were based on what you purchased from them the prior year. What really happened over 22 is that those allocations got depleted. So every month was a new exploration of what you were going to get and what you could actually buy. So makes it very hard to plan when you don't know what you're going to be able to buy month to month. But that's kind of what we dealt with, and you can understand too. The mills were operating at rates between 95 and 105% of capacity. Obviously, 105% of capacity means it's not sustainable. They were basically depleting inventories, and typical operating rates for a mill, they like to be in the 92, 93% range. So tells you they were all oversold. They've spent the year, a lot of them have rationalized their lineups. So they've been taking out different finishes and different basis weights so that their lineup is reduced to something that's more manageable. Gives them more production time than they would have, switching back and forth between grades. But one of the big areas that was kind of noticeable with it, for me particularly, was in coated free sheet, the number 3 grades that are lightweights particularly. The mills have long felt that that's an area that doesn't make any money for them, and they've all been kind of pushing away from that. So that was the first area that we really saw allocations being cut back. So some of the other things we've seen during the year, really just container shortages, which obviously affected imports coming in. So that further kind of hurt that supply line. High fuel costs, energy costs, and then labor shortages, the US ports particularly not being able to get any imports through the ports. And then even when they do get through, a shortage of trucks and capacity to move product within the country. So really all these things have kind of played together with creating delays and the shortages we've seen, long lead times, increases in prices. I'm sure you've all seen some of the staggering price increases in paper particularly. I know won't get into any specifics, but I can tell you that there's certain types of paper we've seen in excess of 50% increase over the last year. It does vary by grades and types, but that's one particularly bad one. So the current state is that we seem to have hit a what people are calling a bubble. So there's all of a sudden imports have started to flow in. We're seeing that port congestion has freed up. I read yesterday that Port of LA is actually back to what they consider normal. Trucking has improved fairly substantially. So supplies have really started flowing again. And at the same time, we've actually seen a bit of a decrease in demand. So I think everybody's got an eye on the economy and what's going to happen next year. Plus, I know we have some customers have overstocked this year and are cutting back for next year. Likewise, we as printers, and I say this globally for all printers, we've been grabbing whatever we can get whenever we can get it. So our inventories are also excessive at the moment, and we're trying to get everything back on a level playing field. So what that's meant is that a lot of the paper mills are now suddenly seeing orders cancelled and dead spots in their schedule, which they're predicting that will kind of last through the first quarter of next year. I think that is something of a guess. Nobody really knows for sure. And I think the economy will play into that greatly. The potential for rail strikes and the European situation with Russia and the Ukraine is definitely having an impact on energy costs and freight costs and everything. They're impacting the imported papers. I guess what that means for us now is lead times are pretty much the same on paper. They haven't started cutting back yet. There may be a couple of exceptions to that, but definitely the mills are starting to reach out and say, hey, I've got an open spot. Would you like some more? Which unfortunately, we would have liked 6 months ago, but now it's a little trickier. I do think some of the mills have actually changed in the way they allocate for next year. They're going to open up. Many of them are opening up blocks of 3 months. So like right now, we can order for January through March. So we're really looking ahead 2 to 5 months to place orders. So I'm going to tell you that the one thing that is critical to us to really help manage that is forecasting. Communicate any kind of forecast you've got, even if they're not completely accurate at this point. Just make sure your printer understands what it is you're planning on doing and what your needs are, so that they can plan ahead for it. As far as pricing goes, I would not expect any price relief. I think that the increases that we've seen over the last 18 months or maybe a little more, they're going to slow right down. I'm not expecting to see any increases in paper really through at least March, April time. And then really at that point, it will depend on the situation the market's in. I think the mills are going to cut back on production. They'll take downtime before they allow prices to start falling. And this is me speculating, but I've already talked to one mill yesterday, and they've already told me they've planned some downtime for February. So I just think that's the way they'll go. And as far as availability, although I'm saying there's some surplus out there, it does vary a lot by grade. So, some of the sheet fed grades, cover stocks particularly, seem to be very short supply still. And again, the lightweight coated free sheet, so 40 to 50 pound in number 3 grades is pretty tight still. The other point that ties into that is that not all printers have access to the same supply. What some of the mills have been doing is kind of targeting who they want their customers to be. My advice is talk to your printer, whoever that may be. keep in dialogue with them. I mean, they should be able to advise you on what they've got available to them, and what alternatives they might have to anything you're looking for. If you've got multiple printers, talk to all of them, because they may all have different things available. So just, keep your options open. And again, kind of key to that is flexibility as well. Just, be prepared to take maybe a slightly different brand than you're used to. Even looking at maybe a slight grade reduction or improvement, just to keep that availability for you.
That's really good advice, Martin. And it makes me wonder how many of us know what kind of paper we're actually using right now. I think it is a good thing to know. Don't be afraid to ask your printer to educate you a little bit about not just what you're using now, but what comparable alternatives there are. And I would guess, Martin, that in this particular world we're living in right now, we don't have to worry as much as we used to in the past about whether our readers and our consumers will see a big difference in our paper. It's really about getting the right paper at the right price, and really less about, I don't know. I remember years ago, like holding one paper versus another and making this really huge decision, I thought, about what paper we were going to choose, but it's not really like that anymore, is it?
Yeah, funnily enough, I had a conversation with a customer yesterday, and they are quite a big publisher, and they were pushing internally their own people to stop specifying brands and just say, okay, focus more on the content that you're putting on the paper than the paper
Right.
itself. It was an interesting discussion, but yeah, you're right. It definitely, there's been a paradigm shift as far as that, I believe, over the last year. Sorry, I was just going to say, don't be afraid to ask your printers for samples either. I mean, samples, they can all get them for you, and if they haven't got them on the floor, they can get them from the merchant or the mill that they buy from. So always good to see samples so that you know what you're getting into before you commit to making any change.
Sure. And then hang on to those samples, because things will change again and you don't want to ask them to send them out again. Thanks, Martin. Brian, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in the world, the wide world of postage?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it quick. I know there's probably some questions out there. Real quick on the logistics side, Martin is correct. I don't anticipate, I think we've hit a plateau on the pricing now. I think that it's pretty much going to even out for now. The big thing is going to be the fuel costs, and this being the winter time, you're going to see your fuel percentages, fuel surcharges probably rise slightly, in the high 40%, but it will go back down. I can tell you that I've been getting a lot of calls from a lot of providers saying they have open trucks, looking for more, a lot of cold calls, a lot more cold calls than I was receiving during the pandemic. So I think the supply is back. I think the supply is there. I think they like their pricing where they are now, so they're probably going to try to hold it for as long as they can. But as a lot of these new drivers get in, a lot of these new companies get in that try to get into the end of the pandemic, start growing a little bit. I think summer is going to be a lot better than it has been the last couple of years. Supply going down, the fuel surcharge should definitely go down depending on what happens in other parts of the country. But from a logistics side, I'm a lot more positive. On the postage side, dealing with the post office, obviously we've got the additional postage increase coming this year in January. It's been proposed. I'm sure it'll be applied. We've been preparing for that for our clients. Like you, we've been doing year-end budget or year budgets for 2023 for most of our clients, for their postage, for their freight, trying to figure out, where they need to cut back or where they need to make changes to. We've been making a lot of suggestions on paper, maybe bringing down the weights a little bit on the flats, maybe getting it to where your spine is, less than 3/4 inch, so you fall from a parcel into a flat. Address orientation, a lot more logistics options for DDU, SCF, those kind of things. even in-county rates for transportation. I've got a client that we do, and we send their mail out and actually enter it into a different city because the in-county rates save them so much money by doing that. So there are a lot of options, and your printer can probably run you some case studies on, you know, what the percentage is probably going to be affecting your catalog or your magazine or your mailer. But there's always a lot of options to take that cost down rather than just, you know, cutting back circulation. There's other options out there. So that's all I suggest, but I'll leave it open to questions.
So just to sum up, you're saying keep an eye on how you can reduce your weight, right? How you
Weight's a big
can.
one with a flat, obviously. With a letter, anything under 4 ounces for a flat doesn't really make any difference. So if you're at if you're at a 48 pager right now, it's not going to do you any good go from a 50 pound to a 40 pound, something like that. But if you're a catalog and you've got 200 some pages, then obviously you got a piece pound rate, then it will affect you. Same thing with a letter. If you're under 3 ounces, there's no reason to change your paper on that. It's not going to make any effect on your postage.
I know we said questions at the end, but there's a direct question for you, Brian, about someone says, Bridget Murray Law says, sorry, I missed the postage rate increase for January. And do you know if another postage increase is planned for 23-24? Can you explain that postage? Can you explain what we do know and what we anticipate? We have strong indicators toward, and then what might happen?
Yeah, just to break it down for you, you're going to see something that says every year the post office sends out something saying, right at the time this, they're going to do seasonal increases. That's going to be on your first class mail. That's going to be on your packages, those kind of things. They try to match what FedEx and UPS are doing for your seasonal packaging to take advantage of the glutton that they're going to have of packages. That's completely different than the postage increases that the PRC, the Postal Regulatory Commission, has. Okay, so set that one aside. The PRC has what they proposed for January 22nd. It's probably been approved if it hasn't already. That, and it looks like somebody wrote down some of the percentages they're seeing or experiencing for that one. The next question is, what are they going to do in the summertime? Because that's normally when they announce yearly their postage increases. Are they going to take another one? My anticipation is that they will. I don't think it will be as high as it's been in past years. It's been around the 4 to 6%. But because of this interim increase in January that they took, I think they have to be at a certain amount. They can't go above a certain amount of, let's say, profit, for lack of a better term. They've got to show that they are a nonprofit, and they got to show where their money's going. So the increase can only be so much. I do anticipate another increase in 2023. And again, I don't have a crystal, like Martin, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't want to guess the percentages, but based on history, I do expect to see it.
Right. And Brian, you mentioned this, but if everybody tune into the chat, because people are posting sort of what we already know about that increase that happened on Monday. Great. Thank you very much, Brian. And I'm sure we'll have lots of questions later. Lisa, you come in and tell us a little bit about what we can do to pivot, what approaches we can take to acknowledge these changes and, you know, move forward with them and be really, really innovative in terms of what we're doing. So maybe I'll let you tell us what you've been doing.
Sure. So I'll share some of my experiences from ACCC, which has a multidisciplinary membership of 30,000 cancer care team members. So, you know, since this is a healthcare provider audience, print marketing has always been really critical. There are issues with emails going through because of hospital firewalls. So we can't rely on email marketing. And also because they're incredibly busy and not in front of their computers all day long, we need print as another avenue to reach them, especially with our most critical resources. So over the past few years, ACCC transitioned some of their most important resources from print to digital. We used to send out every January a 100+ page patient assistance guide, which allowed the members to help their patients pay for their cancer treatment. So we shifted that to a digital database, so that way it could be searchable and updated in real time. And while that's great, our concern was awareness and access from the membership. Since they're so used to getting this print publication, they would call us like, that week if they didn't get it yet, because they were waiting for it each year. So to make sure that we still reach them in the way that they knew, I would send out a postcard with a QR code, which sent them to this new landing page on the website, which allowed them to access that database and see the other resources associated with it. So they still got that touch point from us via print, and we still stayed on that same cadence with them, which was really important. And then similarly in 2023, their journal is going to go from bi-monthly print to digital. So they'll also be sending out a postcard during those same weeks that they would typically get the journal. So that way, they're still reaching them, and, that cuts down on some of the concerns about people not knowing or thinking that, the journal has gone away because they didn't catch the email. And then, just another example of shifting the print strategy. That association produces a lot of lengthy white papers, and we used to mail out, 18, 24-page white papers quite frequently. And so when we had some, challenges with paper access or cost and reduced budgets, we shifted and created a second version, which was 4 to 8 pages. And so we would put that in the journal and then mail that out and then direct people to the website for the longer digital version. So if they wanted to, get into those details or access related blog posts or podcasts, it was all there for them. So that was well received, and it also gave us a chance to increase some of our website traffic and awareness of related content. And then I'll just say on the flip side, when we had programs where we had more budget and could do some things that were fun in the past year, we did start sending out some packages, and really it was a way for us just to do some fun giveaways to the members. We did a geriatric oncology mailing, and so we included a fanny pack, which was kind of like a geriatric thing, but fanny packs are popular. We would send out like a stainless steel tumbler with some other resources, or, a branded notebook to go with publication. So it was also just another way where we could thank them and give them something that was a little bit more memorable. So.
Great. So you're keeping that touch point and using it in a different way. I don't know if you mentioned this specifically, Lisa, but one of the things you told me earlier when we were talking is the use of QR codes is up.
Yes. Yeah. So we went back to QR codes, especially when they just became easier to use by taking a picture of them. And so when we would send out these postcards, they included a QR code to make it easy for them, to get to the site. And then that gave us some metrics on knowing, how many people really from this postcard went to the site. And we also did that, in lieu of mailing some bigger publications. We would create a landing page, put the publications on there with some other resources, and then send out a postcard with a QR code. And that way we can just be quicker and save money and, but still, tell the funders and really meet all of our responsibilities that we promised to be able to reach the members. So I think the postcards have really just become a really important piece of communication and just allowed us to work really quickly.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks to all three of you. And I think now's probably a good time to hear from the attendees, what your questions are and what you're experiencing. If you don't mind, I'll kick it off with a couple of questions that have already come through. An anonymous attendee says, a friend of a friend said her printer told her prices were high still because it was more lucrative for paper companies to make cardboard, and we're going to have a continued shortage. What's the deal on that, Mark? True or false?
It is true. Not necessarily cardboard, but packaging in general. Mills have been pushing. So let me back up. graphic arts papers, graphic arts has been declining generally. It's about 3% a year for quite some time. So what's happened in the past is that the mills have been behind the decline in the industry. So there's been an oversupply, which is why things were, plentiful and you could get paper really quick. After COVID, that all changed with the 6 million odd pounds that we took out over the last couple of years. It's 6 million tons that we took out over the last couple of years, really kind of condensed that. So what the mills are doing, to stay in business, they don't want to just keep closing. They've found that they can sell a lot of these packaging products for a lot more money. So they are shifting the individual machines or sometimes entire mills over to packaging grades. And we actually see that happening. We've got end of 2024 and beginning of 2025, we have two of the remaining 3 mills, the largest mills in North America, are taking either a machine or an entire plant, depending on which one you pick, over to packaging grades, and they will eliminate their lightweight offerings once they've converted those machines. So yes, that is a reality that we're dealing with, and at the same time, while that supply is reducing, the demand is also reducing a bit as well. So, the hope is they stay in balance, but obviously if one swings a lot faster than the other, that's going to affect what the actual outcome of all that is.
Okay, thank you. We have another anonymous question poser who says that they've heard of several nonprofits trying to work together to combine their efforts to get a new contract with a printer, hoping to get a deal for a larger group. It seems like it would be a challenge to work out the contract, but is it an option to sort of get together in order to save money and get access to paper?
Yeah, I guess historically that is combining and getting bigger volume is a good way to do that. Currently, doesn't necessarily work that way. Bigger is not always better anymore, as printers are dealing with the same issues as everybody else, with shortage of labor and getting supplies. So sometimes having more can actually make the job more challenging.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there real quick. I've noticed that we've been, as a printer, this is probably the first time in my career that we've been a lot more selective than we have in the past on our client base, trying to make sure that their work fits what we're doing. And like Martin said, some of the larger printers may take larger work, but if an association comes in and tries to combine, multiple nonprofits into one to get all their titles through there, it may not fit our work schedule as well as the individual titles and get them out quicker. So in the past, yeah, I'd say associations and that kind of stuff would help you with pricing. But right now, the industry itself is trying to pair itself with its customers a little bit closer, I think. So I don't think now is probably the time to do it, maybe in the future, but printing right now is more selective.
We've got another question. With so many people working from home now, how are people reaching their audiences in print? I know some folks don't want to share home addresses versus work office addresses. Any tips or ideas with this new struggle with print pieces?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And yeah, I mean, my challenge hasn't been so much people working from home, but more of just people changing jobs in healthcare. So just keeping up with the members, especially where ACCC is primarily an organizational membership. So, there's another layer of trying to make sure we're in touch with everybody. But that is definitely a good question. I think some people have worked out, with their office, getting their mail or having somebody kind of manage that internally. But it's a new challenge in our post 2020 world.
Yeah. Lisa, you with talking about people changing jobs, which is happening in every industry. My printer, who is from Royal, also acknowledged that a way to save money and, you know, have a smaller print run is to clean your lists. Do a really good job making sure that you're not mailing out stuff to people who aren't there.
Yeah, we've
Great.
definitely worked really closely with our printers, and they've been really helpful with letting us know in advance, you know, how it was shaping up, and then, you know, we would do follow up on the back end and trying to get people's updated information.
Yeah, taking into account that it works both ways as well. If you want to saturate an entire area, you know, then you don't need an address list. You don't need to clean it. You can saturate that entire area and get the best rates they've got available right now. So you definitely want to clean it. You want to cast it. You want to NCOA. You got to do all that stuff. But there's also going the opposite way and just go ahead and hit the entire area, especially if you're doing some kind of advertisement that you want to hit everybody or all the residences in that area. That's the cheapest postage rate they have is saturations.
Another question is on paper weights. What paper weights do you consider lightweight? Is that 35 pounds and below?
That's a great question, and it depends on what kind of grade of paper you're talking about. I'd specifically mention lightweight in reference to coated free sheet, which is your number 3 grades. That would be kind of 45 and 50 pound. If you go down to some of the lower grades, like you get to super cal, they really consider anything below about 28 pound is lightweight. Offset, anything below 50 pound is really lightweight. So it varies a bit by grade.
Another paper question. We are a tabloid-sized industry magazine. Any studies on the impact of scaling down the physical page size of one's magazine? Whoops, I gotta move my mouse around to see the rest of the question. Scaling down the physical page size of one's magazine on your readership or market position.
I can grab that one from a production side. From a postage side, now you can go all the way up to the 15-inch. So from a postage side, you're not making a huge difference. But I can tell you from a production side, since your printers have mostly the, you know, in 3/4 by 10 7/8, if they're going to have those already set up and running at a faster speed, we simply can't run tabloids at those kind of speeds that you can the typical design. So you're definitely going to save money on your production costs. Postage wise, you know, other than changing your weight, that kind of stuff, you're not going to save your money.
And just keeping an eye on the chat over here, lots of conversation about QR codes. They are getting you, we're using them for sure. There was a couple comments about URL shortener like bit.ly versus a QR code. Obviously, it's a much faster entry point for the user to just use a QR code. And so if you've been thinking about dipping your toe into it, it's not as hard as you think. It's the same as a URL shortener. You just find one online and it'll produce the QR code for you. Let's see. Any other questions? Anything more in the chat? Let's see if we have any from before. You know, I had a question, Brian, for this group of B2B and association publishers. Is there a wide awareness already of the difference between like a direct mailing and a co-mail? Is that another place where we could save some money?
Yeah, no question. That's a great question. Co-mailing has become extremely popular. I have probably 30 to 40% of our titles that are actually, if they're national, that are co-mailing at this point. I'm seeing a postage savings somewhere around 40%. Now that's on the postage. You still have to pay for the freight and those kind of things. And that did cut into the savings a little bit this past year. But there hasn't been the huge increase on the freight side because they're still consolidating, still going to the same destinations over and over again with the DDUs, with the SCFs and NBCs. But co-mailing, co-mingling have both been big on savings. And again, I recommend it to anybody that has a publication of 10,000 or more that's going to have a national distribution. If you're going to get a local distribution, then you want to talk to your printer about going direct to the NDCs or SCFs yourself.
And real quick, can you define those two, co-mailing and co-mingling?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Co-mail is for flats. So that's going to be taking your flat title and putting it with another. So it's going to take your home magazine and your sports magazine and you put it all in one bundle because it's going to the same neighborhood. And they're going to be able to get your SCF carrier out or whatever rates because they've made that bundle. That's flats. Co-mingle is for letters. That'll take your big, and they basically run it through a pre-sortation machine. The machine is the same one that the post office uses. It's just sorting that down to a smaller amount. Same thing, taking your pieces, co-mingling it with other pieces that are going out. In most cases, they have one larger client and a bunch of these little clients being able to get in there and get the carrier out rates and the 5-digit rates and all those by going along with them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. I've got one more question. Maybe there are more, but there's a question as to whether there's savings in production based on frequency and economies of scale. So if publishers are thinking about reducing the number of issues, which is the decision that we made, does that have an opposite effect when pricing out the print production?
You want to take it, Martin? I think you know the answer.
Yeah, I think kind of like the other question about combining things. I don't know that it does anymore. It's kind of, it depends a bit on where your printer's at, and if you're using house stocks and that kind of thing, it doesn't necessarily have a negative effect to go the other way with it. And I mean, Meghan, maybe you've done that by the sounds of it. What was your experience?
When we changed our frequency, we made other changes at the same time. We changed, obviously the change in frequency was the biggest thing. We didn't change our printer. We worked with our printer, was a huge partner in figuring this out. And we basically, we cut from 12 to 4. And so we saved 8 issues worth, right? In terms of cost. It was really as clear as that, both obviously on the print production and on the postage side. But we did some other things at the same time that did save us some money. We reduced our trim size so we would have less waste. We standardized our page counts. So we learned that on our production, the equipment that's used for our magazine, the most efficient and most comfortable from a content point of view for us is 48 pages. And so that's our standard size for every magazine. We also went to a self-cover option. So you talked a little bit about the glossy papers being harder to come by. We are on a glossy paper for the body, but we just went to, again, what they call a self-cover, which is to say we don't have a separate kind of paper for our cover. We just use the same kind of paper that's in the body, and that saved us some money as well.
Yeah, I think they're all great suggestions. You kind of covered the whole gamut of ways to save money there, really.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, I mean, back to the question specifically about changing the frequency. I mean, I wouldn't think that, in most cases, printers are probably not going to charge you more because you're doing a few less issues. And maybe that's a time to at least be asking other printers for quotes too, if you're doing that and they, you look like you're going to get an increase for it.
Yeah. Well, do we have any more in the Q&A or? Oh, here we go. I'm wondering if associations out there are offering members opt-in, opt-out of print option as a cost savings mechanism. Our members have asked that we do this, give them a choice and publicize it. That's certainly something that we do at the American Planning Association. And in fact, during the pandemic, we saw our print run drop. And I think it was a lot of people taking that. Most of our members get their publication to their offices, and they were not always at their offices. So we saw bigger uptake of our digital product and higher opt-out rates during the pandemic. How about the rest of you?
Yeah, we haven't made that an option for the members, but I like it, honestly, because with paper waste, it's really, I mean, it's not good for the association or the environment or anybody just to have publications sitting around. But yeah, I think that's definitely a viable option as people are thinking more about that.
Well, I want to thank the panelists so much for all your expertise and your time today. Of course, Martin Sullivan is with the CJK Group, the parent company of Sheridan. Brian Grimes is with Sheridan, and Lisa is with the Association of Clinical Research Professionals. This has been a really vibrant conversation, and I'm sure there's more conversation to be had around this. It's not a challenge that's going away anytime soon. So I'll make another pitch for the AM&P Network Slack chat, which is, I mean, just an awesome resource for people to just pop in, make it a regular thing, and just pop in and see what kind of discussions are happening, ask your questions, help someone else out with an issue. It's a really, really great resource. And if you're not already a part of that community, you can email our very own Jen Smith at AM&P Network, and she'll make sure to help you get set up with that. And then one more plug is for my Slack chat. So next week, Thursday, bright and early, 8:30 Eastern, we're going to talk about what's happening with hiring, retention, and recruitment. What are some of the experiences we've been seeing? And again, a situation that's been really changing over the last 12 to 18 months, and share some of what we've been doing to make sure that we're hiring and keeping the very best talent. So thanks everybody for coming to this presentation. I hope you found it useful. And I think that the panelists' LinkedIn information is going to be put into the chat. So if you would like to continue the conversation with us, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thanks.
moderating, Meghan.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.